Well, welcome to the evolution and future of podcasting. This is a mini masterclass, and I am Majesty AliNICOLE WOW, and I am super excited to be bringing this mini masterclass to you today. Make sure that you do have plenty of note-taking material so that you can jot down some of the wisdom and insights that I'm going to be sharing. This is going to be more informative in terms of just making you aware of the progression of podcasting and what that's going to entail. And so also I want to just mention that in the description, you'll find a robustness of my background as it relates to podcasting, brandcasting, and production-preneurship, and also just my background in media communications in general. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time going over my background during this mini masterclass because this will go by fairly quickly. But I just want to be able to let you know that that information is in there. I will be sharing, of course, some elements and aspects, from my journey. I have a background in radio and television broadcasting, formal training, and that's been many, many years ago, but I've been in the podcasting industry for well over a decade. I stepped into the podcasting industry around 2008 and then started to really expand that around 2009, 2010. And so I've done multi-level podcasting, empire building and teaching and training, and run networks and around online radio. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to find the robustness of my experience within the description. Also within the description, you're going to find different levels of podcasting resources and products and articles and just things that will help you to expand, and evolve. So let's jump right into just getting into the fundamentals around the evolution and future of podcasting, because this is really the basics of what's emerging, what's expanding and evolving. Now, some of you have probably been podcasting for years. Some of you may be new, and some of you may be embarking on this as a new initiative. And this particular mini masterclass will serve every level, because the evolution and the progression is going to apply to any and everyone as it relates to podcasting. So, of course, most of you know the basics around podcasting. It is online radio and being able to deliver different formats of whether it's expertise, empowerment. There's so many different levels of why and how people use podcasting. Now, I will say that this particular mini masterclass will most serve those who are using podcasting for business, which, believe it or not, part of the evolution and future of podcasting is around podcasting-preneurship, and any and everyone will actually have to be using that as a format in a business framework, even if they are not entrepreneurs. But the way things are progressing in terms of the digital age, and also how individuals are having to move their crafts in the world, whether it be speaking, and again, whether it is just empowering others or it is for a specific business initiative, you're going to find that within this new era and expansion, you're going to have to actually be intentional about impact and income. So this shifts on a lot of different levels, because those who have been using podcasting for business are going to find that it's not going to be just where you set up a podcast and then you create a business focus around it and then lead people into your products and services. That plays a part for sure and will always play a part. But the more expansion around this is going to be empiretizing what you do, and also having other aspects and components to be a part of that empire. So there's really not going to be a way of getting around that. And those who get out ahead are going to be the ones who will be able to step into this in their own unique pioneer way, and they won't get left behind, because with the podcasting industry being such a vast industry and also fairly competitive, all right, especially when it comes to niche focus, industry focuses, there's a podcast for any and every topic that you can think of. So how will individuals differentiate themselves and really stand out, and not just stand out in terms of their a unique brand, so to speak, but for impact and income, right? Podcastpreneurs will be the ones who are going to lead the way and be able to carve out their own profitable lanes as it relates to the podcasting industry. So also with productionpreneurship, and I'm going to make some distinctions in terms of what that entails. So let me just talk about podcastingpreneurship. So podcastingpreneurship is a business model that focuses on using podcasting not just as an aspect or a component of the business, but the podcasting itself is the business, the primary vehicle. And it does, yes, segue into the different service opportunities and offerings that an individual provides. But it is the business itself, and it has a business model. Now, let me say this. It doesn't necessarily mean that because it is the business that there's always podcasting going on, all right? Someone can have a podcast series, and that podcast series itself could be a business empire, and it's leveraged as the gift that keeps on giving. But something else around this particular initiative is that podcastingpreneurship is multi-leveled, it's multi-layered. So it isn't just, okay, I have this podcast, and again, I'm featuring guests and I'm doing all of this in my own podcast and letting it lead to business. The older model that worked to a certain extent, but that was more of a hustle model too. And most people did not get great results, around using that model. But in the evolution, we have the progression of what I call and have coined as brand casting, which does get more into the productionpreneurial side, but I want to just touch on it from just a podcasting aspect. So I'm going to use myself as an example. So over the years, I had a brand casting, multi-level brand casting productionpreneurship model. It's really communicationspreneurship. They all work together like a hand in glove. But one of my primary platforms is called the WOW Seed. The WOW Seed had about 5 different levels of productions under that in the podcasting initiative. But it was brand casting because it was showcasing my brand on multiple levels. And then me being able to segue that to in social media to disperse it in a very diverse way. Okay. So this was not where I had one podcast and I'm just featuring it and repurposing that same content across 5 different platforms. No, each podcast platform had a specific initiative around it. So one was around lifestyle, one dealt with entrepreneurs and business owners, and then one was a training platform, one was for clients, and then one was for my celebritypreneurs. They're my proteges. And so I featured them on those platforms. Now, some of those platforms were just productions where it was a podcast series, and then I continued to leverage that. Others where it was seasonal, where I would come on at certain times of the year and provide a certain season, several episodes of a particular theme or so, and then that would be leveraged, throughout the years. And then there were ones where it was more just a consistent throughout the year type of podcast. And so that may sound like a lot of work, but believe it or not, it wasn't. And because I would do short form content, that made it, a much more richer experience in a less is more way. And then being able to segue individuals into products around that particular topic, okay? Particular focuses. So again, a podcastpreneur has a business model, and they're leveraging multidimensional aspects of their branding to reach different levels of target audiences. So as I mentioned, mine was the WOW Seed. And so the WOW Seed, again, had like 5 different platforms. And I used platforms like Anchor, which is now Spotify, and also Blog Talk Radio, TalkShoe, And I've used a variety of different, different platforms, even for other podcasting initiatives that I've done. I've used platforms like SoundCloud, Podomatic, and then of course there's YouTube that you can leverage for podcasting as well. All right. So that's diversification of sort of cross-branding an empire in different departments and segments so that it is targeting specific interest groups. All right. And then there was a particular platform that did deal more with a cohesive, experience. But again, the evolution is that the podcasting is not going to be just one dimensional anymore. So let me talk a little bit about production-preneurship. And so production-preneurship is when your empire, your brand, business primarily operates off of productions. That's the chief primary vehicle. But it is a multi-leveled experience where you're using the whole of social media really as your own production network, so to speak. And that is what I teach in the brand casting initiative. It is the whole of social media, but you could use and leverage primary platforms for what's more signature, but you want to actually be able to cross-brand yourself in a way where you're very diverse. All right. And I'm going to talk a little bit about branded podcasting, a branded podcast and cross-branded podcast, because believe it or not, that's where the evolution in future is in terms of cross-branded podcasts versus traditional branded podcasts, because they all have their place. But again, we're talking about the evolution here and you being able to be ahead of the game so that you don't get left behind or start making shifts and trying to pivot just a little too late, where you're going to have to be playing catch up and you don't actually want to do that. So production-preneurship, let me just paint a picture for you of what that could look like. So again, if you primarily use YouTube or you are podcasting, anything that is production oriented, you have a business model around the productions, and also different seasons where you are doing your production schedule ahead of time, where though productions is primarily your your primary vehicle or chief focus, but it's not dominating your time in your business where you're constantly working on productions, all the time. Because that's what happens with most, is that they start letting the productions take up too much of their time, where in your business model, you operate more like a university, so to speak, where you have seasons that you're offering specific focuses. So if you think about when you're in a university, you're in college, there's a syllabus, and there's certain times of the year where they offer a specific course. So you're more intentional about what's going to be coming out at these different phases. Now, can you still be very impromptu and spontaneous as it relates to your productions? You can, but you want to have a base of content that is more on that university schedule, even if that's YouTube shorts or short form videos or so. You just want to know what's going to be the consistent content that's going to be coming out, that if you couldn't show up on the platform, there's something that's already pre-scheduled and pre-syndicated, but you do those things kind of not during the season where you're in that, you pre-do that. So that's a whole another training. And I've got multiple trainings on so many different levels of the evolution. But again, the production-preneurship aspect is that it is multi-leveled, where you're using various production platforms and functionalities, but there is a literal business model around that. Now, why is this important for me to be sharing this in terms of some distinctions of podcasting-preneurship and production-preneurship? Well, there's a huge difference in terms of when someone just says, I'm a podcaster, and you're a podcaster, and you can be podcasting and thinking that the podcasting is going to bring you business. But vibrationally, you're not really setting yourself up for that. But when you're a podcastpreneur, then that invites a whole nother level of experience. The same with production-preneurship. If you're just doing productions, then you're just doing productions. There's no guarantee that that's going to really amount to something. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, even if you're a productionpreneur or a podcastingpreneur, that doesn't mean that that's going to amount to something either, right? But 9 times out of 10, it actually will, because you'll receive different levels of wisdom and innovative ideas of how to execute for impact and income, and actually have something that's literally scalable and sustainable. All right. But when you're just, I'm just podcasting, I'm podcasting for business, and I'm just podcasting. Yeah, it's kind of a different thing, but that's not what this particular mini masterclass is about. But that was important for me to bring that up, because all of this is, again, part of the evolution and the future of being not just in the business of podcasting, but podcastingpreneurship is the way of business beingness. All right. So as I mentioned too, in terms of the brand casting, that gets into a whole nother level. Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about branded podcasting and cross-branded podcasting, because there is a difference. So over the years, there's been a lot of focus in terms of enterprise radio for business, and a lot of, I don't say hype around that, but a lot of focus in terms of that's what's really needed in terms of being in business and having an empire, having an enterprise, and making your podcast an enterprise initiative. That's actually, believe it or not, more of the older framework. And it was at one point the evolutionary juncture that most in business would need to take. And then having branded podcast around that in terms of standing out as a unique brand. Because when you see some of the big top brands, they have branded podcasts or branded productions, so to speak. And those types of productions have worked well for them. Now, they work well also in the solo entrepreneur community. However, most still find that it's a struggle to actually build up to that. Now, why is that? Because that's part of the older framework. Anything that you see that looks successful at this point, I can tell you that it is old news. It's old news. And most of those branded podcasts are still very one-dimensionally focused as it relates to what their initiative and overall goal is. Now, in the cross-branded aspect, which there's so many different levels of this, but I'm just going to provide just kind of basic fundamentals around this. I shared with mine in terms of the WOW seat, but there are different levels of the cross-branded podcast too that are segments of different niche markets, and maybe not even tied to the same theme. And I have that multiple levels as it relates to my empire, where there are different podcasts that are attached to a core theme or an umbrella, like the WOW seat, so to speak. There are different levels that are just part of my multidimensional empire expression. All right. And that's a whole nother training. But the reason why I'm just seeding you with this is be a little bit disruptive, so that you're just aware of what's emerging, that it's going to take more than just having a podcast and trying to leverage it in these traditional formats. You have to really allow a metamorphosis to take place and an expansion. Now, I use a lot of metaphors in my teachings and trainings. And one of the metaphors that I use, or analogies, I should say, in terms of multidimensional empire building and expression, is the Russian nesting doll. So if you're familiar with the Russian nesting doll, it is the big doll that has the dolls within the doll, a doll within the doll. And so in multidimensional empire expressions, you're going to see that even with podcasting, okay, where it's going to start taking these different levels of empire expression through podcastpreneurship. And again, it doesn't mean that when you set up these platforms, they're going to be ones you have to show up consistently. Some of them will be the one-off that consistently pays off, meaning you could do a podcast series around a particular focus, and that platform is specifically for just that. And maybe you don't even upload anything. You have the option to do that, but you can just say this platform is just a 5-part series or 5 to 10-part series around X, Y, and Z, and that's it. And then you find ways to lucratively leverage that particular initiative. All right. So there's a whole system, around this. And again, as I mentioned, I'll have product links and different resources and articles and things within the description so that you can just prime the pump and start to get yourself, prepared. Now, something else that I want to bring up in terms of the podcasting aspect is that podcasts are not going to be standalone initiatives anymore, even as it relates to just, the business empire. There's other incorporations that are going to come with this particular initiative, including training hubs and different educational platforms and one-stop shop types of initiatives and experiences that the podcast will be able to segue into. So this gets to be really expansive. And some of you I know are thinking like, what in the world? Like, no, I don't want all of that. But you're going to see, that's actually going to be required, because when things start to shift, and they already are, you're going to have to catch up with the evolution. So I'm going to use this as an example, and I've done this in my business over the years in multi-level ways, so to speak. And I share this story often so that individuals have an understanding. So when you think about Walmart, and when Walmart started, and they just had traditional chain stores, so to speak, all over the US, and then some, in Canada, and they started bridging, overseas in some, areas. Now, they then evolved to be super Walmart, super centers, which included a variety of everything. So one-stop shop for the essentials and more, right? So they started dominating the market because already they were the economical go-to. And then being able to have everything that you can think about in terms of what's required for life's essentials. And then, like I said, more, whether you could get your car fixed there, the bakery, the different levels of service and opportunities for people, eyeglasses, and then they had eating places within there. They were a one-stop shop type of experience, right? So once people saw the vastness and the success of Walmart, then you had other stores like Big Lots and Family Dollar and Dollar General, and then even Target, creating their own super centers or marts, or so incorporating different aspects in there. Even the Dollar Tree started having groceries, right? So you start seeing these more one stop shop types of initiatives going on. And so in the online space, it's pretty much the same. You're going to have to be your own Amazon in a sense, and be able to facilitate these holistic experiences. And there's ways to really do this, even just using, using podcasting. But again, it plays out differently. So what I'm just sharing with you is that you're going to have to leverage your podcasting in a empiretized way, and embodying the production-preneurship aspect, and really step up into this greater expansion, and not being a linear podcaster in terms of what you're doing. You're really going to have to be a metaverse of your own, a multiverse, I should say, of your own within this initiative. But again, there are very simplistic ways to do this. Like anything, when you first learn it, it can seem overwhelming just in terms of it's a new thought process, something you have to embody because it's a little bit disruptive. So when Walmart first started, and they weren't necessarily thinking about expanding the way that they were, and then when that concept came to the table and was time to execute, I'm sure that they had some anxiety around, is this going to work or however. But then once they got into it, then it became the way of business. And so they started building out more super Walmarts, or then they would have Walmart neighborhood markets. So they had a multi-dimensional experience of traditional Walmarts, and then they kind of stopped with those, and then built out more of the super centers, and then the neighborhood markets. They were expanding. So it became easy to them once they did that, and they could multiply their efforts. It's the same here. The difference is that you'll create it, and then you don't necessarily have to keep multiplying it. It's just now multiplicity in the marketing initiative, which will be easy as well. So again, there's so much around the evolution and the future of podcasting, but I just wanted to provide just a mini masterclass so that you can be informed. So what I'm going to leave you with in terms of your own call to action, so that you can start to apply some of what I've talked about. Of course, I'm going to encourage you to go back and listen to this several times, and then start brainstorming and thinking about kind of your first two Russian nesting dolls that come outside of the bigger doll. Something I'm going to say also is that what you'll find is that what you think is probably your big main baby at this point, typically isn't, right? The metamorphosis and the evolution will pretty much show that what you're doing now will become kind of a component. There's something larger, something much more expansive in terms of the empire. So you can ask yourself questions too. What is the metamorphosis of this experience? What is the evolution of my podcasting initiative? This then brings you into the space, if you will, in terms of podcasting-preneurship. And that's something else that you can be sitting with is, what does my podcasting-preneurial initiative look like? Because it's not that you start overnight trying to change out everything. You can still be doing what you're doing, but you need to have a production-preneurial mindset around this so that you can get new ways to even amp up what you're doing, while you are also playing from both sides of the track of starting to prepare for the future and the evolution of thinking what's going to be your one-stop shop type of experience. Again, I've got products, and also you can reach out if you need some help and assistance, myself or someone from my team, some of my coaches and proteges who are podcastpreneurs, and YouTubepreneurs can be able to help you with this initiative. All right. So I just wanted to come forth, as I mentioned, and share some food for thought, some considerations, and just to inform you, create expanded awareness around the direction of where the podcasting industry is going and growing as this future is emerging. So again, I hope that this has served you, and take the time out to do the brainstorming. As I mentioned, listen to this several times and start to create your tentative plan, and make a column on a page, so to speak, of where do you need to be taking action now, and what needs to kind of be your steady as you're going, so to speak, meaning what the now and next, all right? The metamorphosis and the evolution. So you want to work from that. What has morphed at this point? And then now, what is the evolution of this expansion? Because that's what's going to be optimized in your newer progression. All right. So I hope this has been valuable and beneficial. And of course, again, make sure that you look in the description and reach out should you need further assistance. Well, I'm wishing you the absolute best. Take care and stay blessed.